Okay. So what we'll do, Johannes, I'll just like if we can just quickly talk about vaccines and their history and the entire philosophy under which a vaccine is developed and given, and then we'll take it from there, and then we'll come to the COVID one and the current stage we are at, right, where like governments are rolling it out, and does it even make sense to take a vaccine? Um, so I don't think we should go into the disease and immune system bit because I think people know that. But just how are vaccines supposed to work? Like what you've been researching this for very, very long, right? So how do vaccines really work?
The theory is that you contract a natural infection, so that generates natural immunity when like all arms of the immune system, Th1, Th2, innate, adaptive. There are many other arms of the immune system also, but the main idea is that natural infections spread and your immune system recognizes them. You have cellular innate immunity and you have like an adaptive arm that's more specific. So that's how you develop immunity in the context of fever, when your body actually, when your immune system actually recognizes a pathogen, and it sends B cells, T cells, T helper cells, all those like kind of good immune cells that fight off infections there, and then your body raises the heat to kill or like basically starve that pathogen off. And that's how you develop like natural innate long-term immunity that in the case of most infections last a lifetime. Like measles, for example, lasts a lifetime if you get a natural infection in childhood. Many other things like chicken pox and others also last a lifetime. Compared to that, the science of vaccination was developed to basically, the theory was that okay, if you contracted naturally, fine, you have robust immunity and you have the best immunity possible because you've contracted the whole virus or the whole bacteria and your immune system recognize the whole thing. So, and it's happened in the context of all arms of the immune system being engaged. You're not unnaturally injecting it via a particular route, it's just naturally coming in. So to basically the theory was that okay, but this comes with a lot of downside. Because a lot of people contract natural infection and then they'll end up like having complications, or it's much more severe for them to handle firsthand. So they came up with this idea, okay, like we can take probably a small part of this virus or bacteria that they're trying to make you immune against, and then put it in a vaccine along with a bunch of other stuff that's there to actually stimulate the immune system to make you respond to their antigen. The antigen is the protein that they're trying to give you an immune response against. And that's the theory of vaccination. But I mean, we can go into why it doesn't work and what are the problems with it. But basically, the idea is that they give you like a weakened or dead version of that virus or bacteria. They inject it in your bloodstream, and then your immune system launches, like creates antibodies and recognizes those that fragment of whatever manipulated version of that pathogen that they have derived and put in that vaccine. So that's the basic theory of natural immunity, as well as like contrasting that to vaccine derived immunity. And now we've come to such extents where the WHO actually changed the definition of immunity itself and only shifted it
Yes,
to like vaccine derived immunity. But that's a discussion we can have later. It'll make
later.
more sense once we're done like
Yep,
covering all
yep.
of that and then come to that later. Yeah, but these are the basics.
Yeah. And a lot of people believe that vaccines actually eradicate a disease, right? Like every time I talk to people about vaccines and the ingredients in it, then they'll be like, "What about smallpox? What about polio? Like those are not there. Those diseases have gone from the face of the earth." What's your take on that? I mean, I
Yeah,
know
so
polio is just relabeled and it's now this acute flaccid, what's that? Paralysis or something.
non-polio acute flaccid paralysis.
हाँ
That's what they
हाँ,
say.
so they've
That's
just like they've just called it something else. तो चाय नहीं है और उसको कॉफी बुला लिया तो चाय गायब हो गया kind of a thing is what they've done, right? What about
I think
smallpox?
we get a good insight from this, like looking at the current pandemic, right? Like
Right.
when you're looking at the past in the vaccine debate, when we've tried to analyze the data, it's been like, okay, it's happened in a context where we weren't around. There weren't so many eyes focused on the data and stuff. But now that we actually look at the COVID data and see how twisted and manipulated that is, and how unreliable so many of these tests are that they're using, it kind of makes you doubt you know everything that's kind of gone behind. Like, okay, if there's so much problem in this data, then all these figures that are thrown at us, that measles, like smallpox has a death rate of 30% and all this crap, how do you just take it? Like, you have to go and
Correct.
start from scratch. So we addressed the polio issue at least in the last
Yeah.
one. So if
Yes,
you
yes.
like, if people want a more in-depth kind of breakdown of polio and like what's the nature of the virus, how, like what are the different like effect the virus actually has. Most people just have a mild gastrointestinal kind of flu-like illness which passes in a couple of days. Most people are asymptomatic. Then a small percentage of them actually like you know get some kind of severe infection, and then even like tinier percent of that actually land up on an iron lung machine, like which was the equivalent of the ventilator, a couple of years
Right.
back when the entire polio scare was going on. So the idea comes down to basically when you're trying to like, this is the theme I've found when I've tried to like evaluate all these infections that they've give sold us vaccines for and proclaim that these things are deadly and infectious and they actually kill us and the vaccine saved us. There's a common theme that they've always over exaggerated the nature of the infection itself. For most people, measles or smallpox or polio is just like it's not even a disease. They've kind of played a game on us by calling it disease. It's a passing infection that you get for a couple of days, and if you support it with good nutrition and rest and sleep and all of that, like what you do when you get a flu usually, you pass through it. It's not just that the virus is the only vector. Like, I mean, the entire work we're doing at Thrive is to show you that it's
Correct.
not just the outside that you're like dependent on. You can do a lot of things for your own self to make sure that like your immune system as well as your body in general are more resilient to fight off these infections. So it's a two-way street. Like, I'm not saying that viruses don't exist or something, although there's a debate about that also. But it's just that I have a the understanding I have is a two-way street where okay, germs and pathogens and infections do have their effect, but we also have like a second layer of defense that we mount against these things. So polio in general, like the main scam they play, if you see with polio and if you see with other kinds of things also, is there's a lot of relabeling that goes on and there's a lot of change of criteria that goes on when they usually do a vaccine drive. So in polio, if you see like in the 50s when they were doing these large scale vaccine trials, the the criteria for a polio case before that was like much more lenient, and after they did the vaccine drive they made it really stringent. So automatically the cases dropped, and they do this kind of shit every time.
Right.
But like I can show you multiple examples of this. It
Okay.
comes up
Okay.
again
And
and
I think
again.
we've gone more in
Yeah.
depth into that in the last
Yeah,
talk,
yeah, yeah.
so people
And
can
also, I
see.
think the main thing to remember is that okay, if you credit vaccines for the eradication of all these deadly infectious diseases, I'll dispute the deadly infectious bit, but okay, let's concede that they're deadly infectious. How do we explain like most of these going away and like the curves actually flattening before any vaccine was ever introduced? So
Right.
there are a lot of other factors like hygiene and sanitation and good nutrition and improvements in refrigeration and all of that that actually helped, like, and the way we kind of live also, that helped to reduce the chronic disease burden. And we also have to remember that this whole narrative about deadly infectious diseases was happening in a time of war, of colonial invasion, of starvation, of people actually being deprived of a lot of things that would ideally keep them healthy. It was happening in a very like Second World War, First World War, that entire Renaissance period.
Correct.
That's the time we're talking about. So there's also a big socio-political kind of element that's important to look at when you're trying to analyze, okay, like why were people's health so messed up back then, even if we do believe that. So I think that just keeping these perspectives, and these are just the general basics I'm laying out. Of course, we can do a dive just on smallpox, just on polio,
Right.
just on the measles vaccine itself and measles and rabies and all that. But I think we have to cover the COVID vaccine
Yeah.
just to
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
understand the
Yeah.
basic concepts of vaccination, and then we take a deep dive into COVID. You'll understand a lot of the other stuff also.
Yes. So I will, at some point later, we'll talk about the adverse effects of the ingredients that are there in a vaccine. But I just want to now
Hmm.
quickly move on to the COVID. So what's the biggest differentiator between the past vaccines? Like, see, even I've gotten vaccinated in the past, right? Like, of course,
Sure, yeah.
not as many vaccines as were put into my daughter's body. I had many. Like the last vaccine I got was the tetanus shot when I delivered or something. Right, I've not gotten any other vaccine after that. But like, I mean, we've been discussing this. So, what's really the biggest differentiator between all the vaccines of the past and the one that's come for COVID right now?
So the similarity, first let's start with the similarity, right? So
Okay.
which vaccine is similar to the ones you developed before? That's the current Bharat Biotech Covaxin.
Okay.
That's made as an, say, inactivated weakened virus kind of version of a vaccine, where they actually made it in the conventional way, like on the older platforms, like how it's not a live virus vaccine, it's an attenuated kind of weakened version of the virus. So that's how the Bharat Biotech vaccine has been made. So that one is the conventional route. which is why it includes like older vaccine ingredients like aluminum and fecal bovine serum and all these things. But the newer vaccines that have come out through Pfizer, through Moderna, through AstraZeneca, these are totally different like animal altogether. There's something made on the platform called mRNA, which is messenger RNA technology. So till now, what these people have been doing is they've been taking say natural viruses, they've been like passing them to radiation, or they've been injecting like chemicals like formaldehyde and other things to make them weaken, and then they basically like grow these viruses in these cell lines that are taken from animals. Then they remove them, and then they actually like package them with a lot of adjuvants so that the immune system responds to what antigen they're trying to produce. So contrast to, so in that case they're actually providing you the protein directly that they want you to mount an immune response against. But what's happening in this case is they're actually giving you a messenger RNA, which basically has the function of instructing the ribosomes in your cells to make proteins. So messenger RNA is something that shoots off from your DNA and goes into the cytoplasm of your cell and tells your ribosomes to actually like, it gives a message like what protein the ribosome should make. The ribosomes are the part of the cell that actually like engage in making proteins. So they actually, instead of it coming from your DNA, they're giving it to you externally. And that it's basically they're doing a lot of technological stuff to actually make it go into the cell and stick around there for a longer time, which is too technical. I don't want to get into that. But they're giving this message, and that message is the message for the spike protein. So the coronavirus is supposed to be like this round virus, and then if you've seen the pictures, there are like these
Yes.
spikes, which of course like they've not seen it actually, but
Right.
these are like
The
like they
CGI.
render it,
Yeah.
and yeah. So the spike protein's genetic code is what they've included in the mRNA. So the mRNA actually goes into your cell, and it gives that message to your ribosome, and the ribosomes are supposed to make the spike protein. And then the theory is that okay, then your immune system will kick in and it will develop an immune response against the spike protein, and then you'll be protected against natural coronavirus infection. Now all of this is just a theory. Like, we're dealing with totally new territory here. mRNA vaccine technology has never been used to make any vaccine. This is the first time we're using it. I can go into instances in the past of how, when they try to develop vaccines for coronaviruses, and I think I found a recent paper as like just in 2019 itself, where they made a vaccine specifically against the spike protein of the SARS virus, the old SARS virus.
Okay.
And the results weren't pleasant. Like the spike protein actually, the spike protein antibody actually made the lung infection worse in that trial.
Oh.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we have a very recent kind of study also to point to, and that was specific to the spike protein of the previous SARS virus, which is very like genetically similar to this one. Like, uh, so yeah, so when they did these vaccine trials in the past, right? The problem they consistently came up with, and this is not just specific to coronavirus vaccines, like this has also been found in the dengue vaccine, in the RSV, the respiratory syncytial virus vaccines that they try to develop in humans early on. What they found is that when they give this vaccine, say with the spike protein or with a coronavirus or with the other viruses we're talking about like dengue and RSV, what happened is the subject elicited a perfect antibody response. So the researchers were like, oh great, like these people made antibodies and the immune systems recognize the specific antigen that we're giving them, so they're going to fight it off in the future, and like hooray, the vaccine is a success. That's what they look at when they're doing these vaccine trials. So efficacy as defined in the vaccine trial is not them giving you the vaccine and then seeing like 1 year down the line or 5 years down the line with clinical endpoints whether you actually develop the infection or not. Okay, they're just seeing that when they give it to you, do you make antibodies or not? And that is assumed to be a marker of protection. But I can give you many examples of how people who've been vaccinated multiple times and with really high levels of antibodies still contract the infection that they're supposed to be protected against. So
Right.
having high level of antibodies doesn't mean you're going to be like protected from infection. It's a marker of contamination. Okay, because I mean, like, we can also go into why what they're injecting you with the vaccine is not actually giving you immunity with what is in the natural environment,
Yes.
because the nature of it is being changed so much. And specifically with these ones, it's like just something totally different. Like, you have this fine, like you have this natural coronavirus floating in the air, SARS-CoV-2, and then you have this like fucking message of a spike protein that they're trying to inject, and to think both of them are the same, and you're going to have, like, if you develop an immune response to that, you're going to be protected against that. It's a theory. You don't know unless you actually test it in real life and see with real end outcomes, which is something the vaccine industry never does. And the entire industry is biased against the entire idea of vaccines not being effective or causing injury. Like, the entire vaccine religion or dogma is that they're always safe and effective. So
Yes.
so
I
they always rush through the trials, and they do them in a way where we can go into this also. So in the trials, to mess up the safety data, they don't use actual placebos. So this is
you've
a big
spoken about
problem.
this last time
Yeah,
also,
yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
how they don't really have placebos. So, but even then, like at least in the past, vaccine development has like, before any vaccine comes out, right? They take a long time before it's released, right? This one is so rushed, given that it's new technology. We don't know how it's going to work. The fact that it's like for me, anything that's going to go mess with my DNA directly is something that I would consider very high risk, right? Like what if that triggers mutation? What if that triggers some level of carcinogenesis? Then there is no telling that.
We've seen
Yeah.
mutation related problems with the past flu vaccine. Okay, so this is
Hmm.
like the 2009 flu vaccine that gave people narcolepsy. You can go look that up. It was a rushed vaccine, very similar in context. Okay, there was entire like flu pandemic hysteria that was created by the WHO in 2009. They rolled out a vaccine really fast, and it landed up giving a bunch of people narcolepsy, which is basically like your consciousness just drops
Right.
anytime, like you just fall to sleep and you come back up. That was the result of the vaccine. They acknowledged that. So I mean that vaccine itself, even though it wasn't an mRNA vaccine, they found that it actually like created genetic changes which resulted in that situation. So right now what's happening is a lot of these fact checkers and all go around saying that, oh, this vaccine can't change your DNA, the mRNA is just supposed to go to the cytoplasm and do what I told you it would do. But there are certain biochemical mechanisms that can kick in, which can make that mRNA actually get transcribed into your DNA. So
Right.
your cells actually have a lot of reverse transcriptase enzymes. Reverse transcriptase is the enzyme they're using in the RT-PCR test. That's why it's called RT-PCR, like reverse transcriptase
Right.
polymerase chain reaction. So the test actually takes the RNA and the reverse transcriptase converts that RNA into DNA. So this reverse transcriptase enzyme is also present in your cells naturally. You
Hmm.
also have a lot of retroviral genetics in your DNA itself. You have like other viruses that could be present in your cell that are giving off this enzyme. So there are many places the enzyme could be present in your cell from. But if that enzyme is present, and then you have another enzyme called DNA integrase that can actually incorporate the DNA into your genetics. So if that, in the right context biologically, if that takes place, it could actually mutate your DNA. There's a very real risk. So if
Yeah.
the scenario is set up, like the vaccine in and of itself is not going to mutate your DNA, but if the right circumstances are present, it could go down those biochemical pathways, and that could actually happen. So that is a very real risk. And what I was talking about in the past, so the time frame becomes relevant because I was talking about the past coronavirus that were developed, right?
Hmm.
So they saw these perfect antibodies in the animals, in the ferrets, in the cats. There have been many studies with this. Like I can send you a ton of papers, and the people who are watching also. But they've tried to develop these vaccines for coronavirus, and the reason they failed is because they developed the wrong type of antibody. So there are two types. Like one is called binding, one is called neutralizing. So neutralizing is actually the one that's supposed to like identify the virus, bind to it, and actually disintegrate it. Whereas binding antibodies are something that actually help the virus instead of helping you. Like they make it easier for the virus to go infect your
Oh.
cell and actually like take over your cellular machinery. Yeah. So what was found in these trials is that they developed the wrong type of antibody, and when they saw it in these trials, they were like, okay, the antibody is developed, it works great. But when they saw in the trials with the rechallenge, okay, so in animals you can do this because it's not an ethics issue. So they usually like give the vaccine and then they rechallenge these animals with the natural virus, okay, that's
Hmm.
found in the air. And what they found is that these animals actually developed twice as worse a form of the infection
Wow.
because they were like sensitized to that protein earlier, and they developed the wrong type of antibody, and then next time when the natural virus came in, it actually like made the issue twice as worse, and a lot of the animals ended up dying. And even when they did the RSV trials back in, I think, the 1980s or 1990s, it was, I'm not sure, but they had to stall that program because they were developing these RSV vaccines for children, and many children died in the trial because of the same issue. So they found this in dengue, they found this in RSV, they found this in coronavirus vaccine development. This is why we don't have a vaccine for SARS or MERS, because the vaccine programs always got stalled because of this ADE issue. It's called antibody dependent enhancement. So this is one of the biggest risks that's there with these vaccine trials. And the problem is they have not totally skipped through the animal trials. Like Moderna and Pfizer both have done animal trials in this case. But what they've done is instead of looking at the areas where that problem would show up, like, I mean, this is go too technical into the weeds, but just to like give it all out, when they did these trials in the past, the marker they saw that would go up in terms of inflammatory response because of this antibody dependent enhancement was interleukin 5. Okay, and when they did these trials right now with Moderna and Pfizer, they actually looked for all the other interleukins other than that, and then they didn't look at the multi, like the all the organ system. They just focus on the lungs. So you have multi-system organ failure that occurs with all the other things when you have that ADE response.
Right.
So what they would see, had they looked at the interleukin 5 and this, they actually didn't look at that. So although they claim they did the trials, but they didn't actually look at the thing that has been consistently showed in the past, that this is where the problem is. So if you want to look for that, you obviously test for that. So
Wow.
they just omitted that. So I mean, I had to dig a lot to kind of find
Find
this
this.
stuff. But yeah, I mean, this is what's happened. So yeah, I mean, this is just like the genetic modification and the ADE problem are of course big. The fact that they've rushed this in a year is very, very astounding, because okay, like even if they cleared all the regulatory approvals, made that lesser, whatever it is, fine. But fine, like from the fastest vaccine that was developed was mumps. It took 4 years, I think, right? So I can understand, chalo 4 years ka 3 years ho jayega, 2 years ho jayega. How the hell can you develop a vaccine in 9 months? Okay,
Right.
with totally like experimental technology, never been used before on the human race, which has like so many risks. And this whole trial deal is also something like just we can go into, but just that the problems that stick out in these vaccine trials are just like phenomenal. There are major things like the vaccine is not even seen if it can stop transmission of the virus or not. Like they're not even testing if if I get vaccinated, I can stop the virus from spreading to you.
Right.
So it's not a vaccine, okay? It's a medicine at best. I mean medicine in terms of like pharmaceutical. I'm not saying it's effective, but
Right. Right.
just the terminology of it. So this entire narrative of this is a vaccine is, I think we just need to start there and say no, this is not a vaccine, because vaccines are made under like the concept of public health to for the larger greater good. Even those are like really false concepts, which I don't have the time to go into right now, but the problem is that they've portrayed this as a vaccine to make it look like, oh, we need to take it to protect our elderly, because this is the problem that always comes up in the vaccine debate, right? Like it's not about you, you are healthy, you are fine, you are
Right.
me, but it's about the other person. But you have like, I don't know what more people need. You have like the ex director general of the ICMR, chief scientist at WHO right now, Soumya Swaminathan. She came out and gave a statement, and she was kind of using it in a more like control sense. Like she came out and gave a statement that the vaccine won't work, so you still need to wear a mask and you still need to quarantine, etc.
Exactly, right? Like, what's the
Yeah,
point
yeah,
of taking a
yeah,
vaccine that is so experimental, that's going to mess with your DNA in all probability? And we'll go into like what we're seeing in terms of adverse effects already, right?
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that has a whole lot of other ingredients that are not safe. If you still have to wear a mask and social distance and do quarantines and all of that drama, right? Like, then what is the purpose of this?
See that the
Vaccine?
entire argument is very flawed, like just on a fundamental basis. Vaccines are supposed to modulate the immune system to make you more resilient to infection. We have so much science right now on insulin resistance, vitamin D levels. We do the same thing. Like, why do you
Yeah,
call one thing a vaccine and you don't? Like, if the entire concept of a vaccine, like, I'm not against vaccination, because
right.
vaccination is the concept of improving your immune system to like be more resilient to infections outside. So it's not just sticking a needle in my arm through which you can do that. You can do that through 10 other ways that we're trying to teach it like to people at Thrive.
Right.
So why does one thing get called a vaccine, and then any talk of taking personal responsibility for your dietary choices or for your lifestyle or for things like that is considered quackery and pseudoscience when it's backed up by like good peer-reviewed literature and very high quality
Yeah.
journals?
So quickly, I think we'll move into uh, what are the ingredients, the other ingredients that are there in a vaccine. Like there are preservatives, there are adjuvants, there are so many things, right? And I mean the previous vaccines as well as the current one, and how does that, because like I know even in my own daughter's case, for example, when she was given the chickenpox vaccine, I don't know how old she was. I think she was like, is that at 4.5 or 3.5 or something like that. She was given that shot, and at that time, within like 3 days, she developed something called as the hand, foot, and mouth disease, and it looked so identical to chickenpox, and everything was happening. And then I asked the doctor, did the vaccine really trigger? She's like, no, this is just another thing that's going around. It's a completely different strain. So that happened. That's when I became suspicious of vaccines. And then the swine flu vaccine came, and I, like an idiot, went and gave that to her. And she actually developed ADD symptoms, right? So she was a very calm child, and then suddenly she got the swine flu shot, and then she had a temperature, not a very high one. And after that, she was just like jumping off and, like, very hard to kind of not necessarily control, but she was restless. She wouldn't really pay attention. She was somebody who used to sit and draw and paint and everything, and then she just developed that. And then I went deeper, and then I started searching, and then I realized it was the mercury. So we did some stuff to kind of chelate that, change her diet, and of course things changed. But I'm lucky she was a very mild case, right? But I know that there are things in vaccines that really impact. Like
See,
in a,
this is the
yeah,
basic problem, right? Like you just described it so perfectly. What they do is in the trials, they do it for a really short time,
right,
and they have all these issues in the trials. They don't basically everyone. They have so many people who drop out on the trials who they just eliminate from the data. They use a lot of stuff like this to just like make the trial look. They use faulty endpoints, like instead of actually looking at infection, they look at antibodies. So they do a lot of this stuff and make it look like the vaccine is safe and effective, which lay people obviously can't understand. And then they say, okay, like for long-term stuff, we'll depend on the surveillance data, like what surveillance system they have set up. And when you actually get a vaccine injury with a child and you go to the surveillance system, the entire system is fully biased. They're
right,
like, no, the problem. So actually, the place where you were supposed to test if the vaccine results in these issues, you massage that data and you have all this manipulative stuff put in so that you don't find it there, and then you put the blame on the surveillance data. And when it comes to the surveillance, you basically have a bias system that's basically going to try to dismiss you and find an alternative explanation as much as possible until they absolutely like force and they can't come up with something, and they'll be like, yeah, okay, this is probably the vaccine.
right.
So yeah, this is where a lot of the side effects actually get underreported. Like even in America, like the VAERS, the Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System, it's not a system where if someone gets like vaccinated and they're injured, it automatically gets reported. They wait for the people to actually come and report. And so many people who get vaccinated don't even know that the system like this. Like they've done surveys and they found this. So the actual reporting of they make this claim that $4.1 billion have been paid out to victims. But I know from knowing people personally who fought in vaccine court in America that it's a totally like corrupt and crooked system that's like totally against the person who's injured, and they have a lot of stuff in place to basically so whatever has been given is like a really really tiny amount of what would actually be given were we doing honest science and like actually pursuing trial data objectively and in a scientific way.
Yeah. What else did I want to ask before
We
we
have a lot to go
actually?
into actually, so if you just want me to
Yes.
go, so the
Just
vaccine
go, like,
ingredients, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so see, the problem is right now the way they're getting around this is they're saying that okay, this vaccine is new, and since we don't have to grow all these viruses and we don't need all these adjuvants now, so a lot of the stuff has been cleaned out, so that they've kind of had that selling pitch. But if you see the ingredients, like so currently, like whatever data we have, whether it's AstraZeneca, whether it's Moderna, whether it's Pfizer, whether it's this Bharat Biotech, it's marketing data from the company. Like all of the stuff they publish is their own, like the company coming up with a study, and they claim some of it's been peer reviewed and all of fine, that's debatable, but I don't want to get into that right now. But at best, a lot of the data they're publishing is not fully transparent. And I've seen this in the past also with vaccines, because it's like when they use, I'll give you an example. If they use an ingredient in the vaccine to grow the vaccine and they claim they've taken it out, but some of it obviously gets left in there, like you can't just fucking totally clean out something, they don't have to list that. Then they get
Oh,
around ways to not listing aluminum on the package by like putting it in another phase and like it not being in the end. So they have like a lot of tricks like that to actually make what is there inside the vaccine, like some of it doesn't actually come on the the vaccine insert, what's called the vaccine insert, which is the list of ingredients, right? So in this vaccine they're using like, if I think the insert was out for Pfizer if I'm not mistaken, and they use like three ingredients that no one in vaccine research, like I know people who've been researching vaccines for the last for like 30 years, okay, like and I mean people have spent like 50,000 60,000 hours just researching vaccines and made it the full lifetime thing. And I mean, people like that are saying we've never seen these ingredients before. Like, this is the first time we're seeing like really, really weird name like ALC5, some like, alphanumeric gibberish, like, after that, like stuff like that. That's totally, we don't know what it's gonna do in the body. So there's totally like new ingredients that are in these vaccines. And there are obviously like, aborted baby fetal cell lines have been used
Hmm.
to develop the AstraZeneca and the Pfizer vaccines. So with that specifically, there's always been a risk of DNA contamination, and that's been linked to autism in the past also because of the high amount of DNA that actually, the human DNA that actually gets left in the vaccines, right? So that risk is obviously there right now. And the problem with this one is we don't have transparency. Like, most of the companies haven't come and published their like vaccine inserts. We don't have a proper vaccine insert yet. Like, the only company that is there for, I mentioned, like, they have like 8 or 9 ingredients that they've listed, but other than that, no company actually come out and said anything about the ingredients they have. So it's totally like something secret. But we do know some of the ingredients they've used, like, which cause obviously religious and ethical issues. Like, for most Indians, I think, like, with the eating cows or like using anything from cows, if they're like, harmed in any way, is a problem. So they have used fetal bovine serum for developing the Covaxin, and the Covaxin obviously has like all the other old stuff like the aluminum and all the adjuvants and all, because it's developed in the old way, right? So that has a lot of the shit that's been there in the past vaccines. Formaldehyde, polysorbate 80, all of that stuff is obviously there, but we don't know for the neo vaccines, like, because the list isn't out. I mean, it's just like, to speculate what's inside. But some of the things we do know about, like some of the things I stated, and the use of like nanotechnology. So the mRNA is actually coated in a lipid bilayer membrane outside, which is like a fatty acid membrane, which is made of a nanoparticle. So they're
Hmm.
actually using nanotechnology to like coat the mRNA from the outside and protect it, actually make it go inside the cell. So they are using totally new stuff. And nanotechnology, I mean, this is an emerging kind of field of science. It's quite advanced now, but they do have nanotechnology applications like hydrogel and a couple of other technologies that have been developed by the US like military and defense community, that actually have the capability to keep surveillance inside your body, to keep track of your parameters. Like, we talk about biohacking and stuff, but they actually have this technology that you could like inject into your body, hook it up to a cell phone, and then it keeps it's like a continuous glucose monitor that we talk about in the
Right.
functional medicine world. That kind of capability, tracking your blood pressure, blood sugar, emotional, like biochemical changes. It has a lot of capabilities, and it also has the capabilities to manufacture drugs on demand inside your body. So, like, this is just a trust game. Like, you don't, I mean, specifically with them, like, I don't want to get too conspiratorial here, but just seeing the
Hmm.
mindset of these people, and like, how steep they are in population control and eugenics. This is a chance they're getting to get into like a vast number of people on the planet's bodies. Like, till now we've not had adult vaccines, we just had childhood
Right.
vaccines, but this is the first chance they're getting on a large scale to go after everyone. So I don't think they would like miss something like that. And this is why, I mean, we've had scientists like the ex Pfizer head Mike Eden.
Hmm.
He's come out along with Wolfgang Wodardt, who was a person who actually like fought the previous swine flu pandemic, which he claimed, and they actually did an investigation on this, that time the pandemic was hyped up and it wasn't actually a pandemic, because the WHO colluded with the pharmaceutical companies to sell vaccines by hyping
Wow.
up the disease itself.
Wow.
So these two people again, Wolfgang Wodardt has come back in this pandemic, and Mike Eden is the ex-head of Pfizer. So they've come out and reported the real risks of these vaccines, which again, as I stated, are like DNA mutation, antibody-dependent enhancement that I already stated, and they've also stated that the spike protein of this coronavirus is very, very similar to a protein the spike protein that's actually made in a woman when she's about to like conceive, which is very, very
Okay.
important in pregnancy.
Okay.
So they've raised the real risks of if your immune system develops antibodies to that, and it starts through molecular mimicry starts attacking your own spike
You're
protein that's actually involved in pregnancy, you'll abort, or you'll drop your child. So that risk has been stated as well, and I think it's a very like real and plausible one. uh,
right.
yeah, so these risks do exist. These are the main risks, I think, with the vaccines. If you talk about the Indian context, like Bharat Biotech's approval has been given in a very shoddy way. So usually, how it's supposed to happen is they're supposed to submit phase 1, 2, 3 trial data, and then the regulator sees, okay, like if it lives up to it or whatever. Of course, we know regulators have conflicts of interest and stuff, but assuming that they're fair and like actually a public sort of protecting the public health and all that, uh, even in that, guys, like they've not fulfilled their duty right now, because they've approved the Covaxin without it having any phase C data. The phase C trials haven't been completed out here. And even the phase 1 phase 2 is not yet published. Like the
Mm.
Covaxin data is not published at all, so we can't actually like review any of the science or get the raw data. Like this is what the researchers have been asking for, right? Like this is what I said, like a lot of the stuff, the studies and the material that's come from these companies have been like kind of press releases and their own studies that they've done. We need the raw data if we actually want to like analyze, because they use a lot of statistical modeling and tools like p hacking. It's called p hacking, when they like try to like eliminate people from the trial and make the numbers fit to achieve the results they want. This is a term that's called p hacking. So they use tricks like this to actually, like, they set out what they want before the trial itself, and then they use all these statistical tools to actually make the data fit the conclusion they set out to want, right? So if we
Yeah.
get the raw data, then scientists and independent researchers can actually audit that and figure out. So we don't have any of that right now, to be
Okay.
honest. And they've not published the Covaxin data, hasn't been published to us. Even the AstraZeneca vaccine, the Serum Institute one that the Poonawallas are developing, uh, you know they've not even done proper phase 3 trials. So they say it's like, if you see the language and actually go look at the paper, they say it's like phase 1 2, phase 2 3. Like they've actually, instead of doing a large trial like Moderna and Pfizer did with
Mm.
30,000, 40,000 people, and we can go into that also, like why the end outcome, like the 90% and all this 95%, they didn't actually see it on the 45,000 people. They saw it in like 200 people out of them, and
Oh,
like, yeah,
yeah. They've
150
just
people out of them.
extrapolated and
Like they shrunk the
mm.
end, like n, the actual number of people who were involved, who they made the comparisons with. They were really really tiny compared to how many people they had in the trial. So I don't want to like go into that, but I'm saying even the fact that Pfizer and Moderna did one large like one trial with a phase 3, like a large trial together. AstraZeneca didn't even do that. Like they've been criticized by scientists and all mainstream people for merging trial data. Like they did one small phase 2 somewhere, they did one thing here in Brazil, and then they merged all of that and put it into one paper and made it look like it's phase 3. But that's not. You want phase 3, you want like, these different trials have different rules, they have different intervals of the vaccines are given. You can't like compare and put all of them in one paper and do that, but that's what they did.
Mm.
So these are again like they're really technical, like nuanced arguments, but I'm just saying like there's whole host of problems, and these have been critiqued by mainstream scientists as well as people like us who are skeptical of the anti-vaccine paradigm altogether. But people on both fronts have had many issues. Like even people who believe in vaccines usually have had a lot of problems with this one, because of the way a lot of the things I described have been rolled forward with. So we can talk about some cases like over here, just the
Yeah.
way the trials have been done, like the Bhopal gas tragedy victims, they were actually used as guinea pigs recently. And it's very sad. So what they did is, in this Covaxin trial, this supposedly indigenous vaccine, which is not indigenous at all, Bharat Biotech has been funded by Gates for many previous vaccine programs as well. So the trial they did in Bhopal, they actually went to people like who had suffered from the Bhopal gas tragedy early on, and then they were told that they were actually getting COVID medicine, and they
Mm.
weren't told that they were part of clinical trial, which is experimental, and they were getting a vaccine, right? So they gave these people that, and then like a lot of noise has been made about, and thankfully, media outlets have gone and covered the issue. NDTV did a good report. I see a lot of like people who are generally kind of fact check, debunk kind of mode, but even they've been going and covering the issue. So everyone's kind of picking up and reporting on that in the press, at least in the liberal kind of leftist press they are. So the problem is that they weren't told that they were actually being given a vaccine. It's
Mm.
experimental, and like there's one person who actually died. And you know how it is, like what we're discussing, like you went to the child, she got vaccinated, the doctor told you it's not that, it's something else. So they always try
Right.
to do that, right? Like,
Mm.
so it's the same thing. This guy died, and the family members have gone so far as to say that the trial conductors are not even like coming and taking a report of what happened, and like stuff like that, when they're actually supposed to take health data every day, or like on a daily basis, what's actually going on with health parameters and all. So these are the accusations that have been made from the family of the person who died. Many people have come forward and said they're perfectly healthy before getting the vaccine, and after getting it, and they didn't know they were part of this trial, and they were given this money, and kind of through deceit they were taken into the trial, right? So even they have kind of suffered adverse effects after that, like, immediately after getting that. So these are the these are the problems that have been faced in the Bhopal sort of trials of Covaxin. And then we had a case that came up in the Serum Institute's trial where one person suffered from transverse myelitis, which is like a spinal cord inflammation, severe like damage spinal cord. And he filed and he actually lost his memory for a while, if I'm not mistaken. And so he filed a 5 crore lawsuit against Serum, and Serum, instead of having like some kind of empathy that okay, this guy's got a vaccine and then he suffered from this, whether it's from the vaccine or not. Okay, from a company standpoint, like chalo, they can probably at least consider that it was from the vaccine, but instead of having at least some level of compassion, they filed a 100 crore lawsuit back
Yeah,
against.
I read that. That's insane.
Yeah, so that's the level of ruthlessness they have. So I mean, it's just a question, right? Like now they're saying that the government has actually come out and said, like earlier we were speculating, like maybe there'll be no legal compensation and all, and we'll have nowhere to go. But the government has come out and said the liability now is on the companies itself, right? So you say, let's say you like get this vaccine and like this person, you suffer something like this, and then you go to file a lawsuit against like Serum Institute. Are they going to treat you in the same way that they treated this guy? I mean, it's very plausible, right? Like they're just going to deny, and they're going to say it wasn't from the vaccine, the new COVID mutation did it, or something like that. Like there's so much. The problem now is we're entering a paradigm where all these environmental factors that are going to be causing health issues to us are going to be swept under this virus rug. So, as I said, like it's a two-way street. Like the healthier your body is, of course, you won't have like viral multiplication, actually viruses or bacteria, anything taking hold of your body. So it's a no-brainer that if you kind of weaken that through 5G and just like blocking of the sun, which reduces the vitamin D levels, all of this stuff is going on. Like all this environmental mayhem, that's actually the pollution, pesticides, heavy metals. Like we've gone on about this stuff. We know the problems, right? Processed foods and how that causes
Right.
insulin resistance. All of that is really, really making us weak in our ability to fight back. So when all of this is going to get worse in the next year or two, when the 5G rollout comes out mainly, because that's what's like really going to take this to a next level, and when the vaccine adverse events have kicked in, right, which further weaken the immune system and make them more susceptible to infections, as I stated earlier. So that's when like all the problem that will manifest, they can easily sweep it under new virus, or and then like see, I'm not a virus denier, but the entire rules of actually say proclaiming that a new virus exists and it caused disease are very, very weak. Like they aren't scientifically robust. So I don't deny that viruses exist, but I would obviously love to see much stronger science before we actually establish that okay, there's a new virus and it's linked to these symptoms. Of course no virus causes disease. Like I don't agree with that. It's not.
Correct.
I mean, it's,
Unless,
it's not causing anything. Like if it's causing something, I think it means that okay, like if you get it, then everyone kind of gets it. But of course, that's not how it is, because if you get it, like you have a lot of factors in your own control which will determine whether you succumb to it or not. So they don't literally like cause; they're associated with disease depending on what your internal state is. That doesn't mean they don't play a role. Like a lot of people go
yes.
from there and then say that though this is totally depending on your terrain. But yeah, I mean, like if your terrain is weak, you'll actually succumb to it. So if you didn't get it, you wouldn't succumb. So that means it does play a factor over there. Yeah. So
Yeah,
this is the
even
entire like.
with bacteria, right? So H. pylori, we see a lot of cases who come to us with acid reflux and acidity and all of that, right? And we test them for H. pylori, they're usually positive. Now the thing about H. pylori is it's present because of our water system. Like if you test any Indian, you'll mostly get H. pylori antibodies, right? Like some of us have been infected, but what triggers an active infection, what makes it really bad for some people is the food they've eaten or the stress they've had, or if they've actually been on PPIs or something like that, right? Then that H. pylori really activates. Otherwise, it's just there. So, and it's the same, right? Whether it's the Epstein-Barr virus or any other virus, we've seen antibodies to so many microorganisms. We just go and test for antibodies, but they don't necessarily always get activated. Like I have Epstein-Barr virus antibodies, which could have been the reason why I had Hashimoto's and all of that going on. But now that my system works well, right? So I don't really have any virus.
You kind of silence them. Like I think
Exactly,
Julie
yeah.
Mikovits is a good person to listen to on this,
Yeah.
because she goes a lot into the technicalities of like how different viruses kind of impact the immune system, and they
Right.
play with that. So it's a very technical field. But if your immune system is working correctly and if all those factors are there, you will have viruses in your body, but they won't replicate or take over. Like that's.
Right.
I was reading some like very interesting studies recently about how like selenium deprivation can actually activate Epstein-Barr virus and other things. So actually like depriving your body of minerals or micronutrients can actually like trigger infections that wouldn't have been there were you kind of
Or even
sufficient.
candida, right? Like if you have insulin resistance and high circulating blood sugar levels,
Yeah.
then candida.
Yeah.
So it's not just viruses, it's any microorganism that is normally there in your microbiome. That if there's an imbalance of your internal terrain, then that microorganism gets an upper hand, right? So it's literally that, and that's why we're seeing when people get like high doses of vitamin D or do any of these other things to kind of fix the terrain, then even if it's a COVID like infection, like Swati's dad, right? He tested positive and it got really bad for him until we did so many interventions, right? Like we literally, so Swati took over his case in the hospital. She told the doctor, I know what to do, so you stop, right? And like we did so she made sure they gave him vitamin D shots, and then we did echinacea, we did zinc, like ionic zinc, multiple doses through the day, and he's out. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, we can talk about COVID
yeah,
treatments if
yeah,
you want
yeah.
later.
I
But there
think,
was so
but we
much
don't
so much
have
stuff
enough.
now
Yeah, we
on.
don't have
Yeah, we
enough
don't.
time. I just wanted this to be about the vaccine because what happened with a couple of tribe members is like the ones who are out of India, especially their employers started insisting that they take the vaccine, and then a couple of them got it. And then there have been people on the groups who've been asking us, right? Like, it's being rolled out in my country, should we do it? And I thought we should just quickly talk about it. Like, I mean, we've covered a lot in the last 50 minutes or so, but and most people listening so far would know what our opinion about the COVID vaccine is. But just to say it outright, right? Like in my opinion, if it came to me, I wouldn't take it, right? What's your opinion? Like, should people be taking the vaccine? Like, is there any rationale at all behind like taking the jab and like going for it?
See, people could make an argument if there was science that like it actually prevented infection, and I mean even that science would be weak because they would be basing it on PCR tests.
Right.
So I don't want to go there. But let's say hypothetically they did prove that it stops infection or transmission or whatever, then someone could make the case. Fine, like there's a risk you might transmit it to someone elderly. So fine, but then right now there's absolutely no rationale because this
Right.
vaccine is just the trials are designed in a way the phase 3 trials are designed in a way to see whether the vaccine after it's given to you it reduces mild COVID symptoms in you compared to the placebo. And as I said, we don't even know what the placebo is. I'll tell you, in the AstraZeneca vaccine trials and Serum Institute's vaccine trials, they're using the meningococcal vaccine as the placebo, right? So the group they're comparing against is being given a vaccine, and this one's being given a new vaccine. So the side effects kind of get masked, because it's not because of the antigen that the side effects are happening, it's because of the other garbage inside that the side effects are coming up. So if you use a previous vaccine also, you're going to have issues with that. And this is how so many vaccine trials have happened. So they've also covered up a lot of the safety issues, right? And if you see the Moderna papers like early on and the Pfizer ones, and the Moderna one, I think 80% of the second like high dose group had like severe systemic side effects, and these people are given like paracetamol and like fever suppressing meds and all during the trial to mask the side effects. This is the
Wow.
kind of stuff they're doing in the trial itself, right? So just there's that small time frame where they have to make the people look good. They're actually like giving them medicine that suppress their symptoms, and as we know in functional medicine, like medicines don't cure anything; they just like patch a problem which
Right.
doesn't really solve what's going on inside. So the other kind of tricks they've been using, so the vaccines haven't been evaluated to see if it will reduce your risk of like severe COVID outcomes, which is even if you're trying to see it as a medicine, you want to see it from that perspective, right? Like, does it actually reduce your
Work.
risk of going to hospital? They've just seen
Right.
if it reduces the risk of getting a cold or cough, which are like just normal, like flu passing, which strengthens your immune system like every time it comes. So that's not really like I mean, this is the whole problem, right? Like people see uh, like actually getting a runny nose and a cough and a viral infection and all as a bad thing when it's actually like some element is involved where your body is actually like cleansing your lymph nodes and
Right.
releasing stuff that's
Right.
been stored inside to some extent. So the entire narrative of like seeing fever as bad, seeing like a fucking this like gun checkpoints and all everywhere you go to see if you have fever and all. Fever is a good therapeutic response. It shows that the immune system is working. It's that raises the body temperature to actually like kill these pathogens inside. So that means the immune system is doing the work for you. But then
Right.
in these vaccine trials, they've only seen these mild side effects, and even that, as I said, they've seen the relative risk. So what they've done is out of the 40,000 people, they've compared like 243 people. So out of those 200 of people were given the vaccine, and then 50 or something were given the placebo, and then they compared both those groups and showed that it is 95% effective. But what actually should be done is they should see the absolute risk.
Hmm.
right? So that is very, very like statistically insignificant once you see ke chalo, like comparatively it's fine, but let's say the placebo, like what is the absolute risk of him if he contracts an infection and he's not given a vaccine? What is the absolute risk of him doing that? It's very, very, I mean, it'll be less than 0.001% also, probably, if you do the math on that. So that's the way they've actually played around with this and like made that whole like thing that's supposed to be absolute risk. When you're seeing like, okay, if I get the vaccine, what is my risk? They've compared it to a placebo with a really small sample size and chosen the wrong endpoint. So that's, it messed a lot of the data up. So even that's, I mean, again, as I said, like this is, you have to take their word for it,
Right.
and they're publishing marketing data to you. So these problems, of course, so this totally like takes away any case for people getting vaccinated. Like, I mean, we have been teaching things like so many things, like, you know, vitamin D, magnesium, selenium, like zinc lozenges that are like
Yep.
really, really effective in killing a viral infection if you take it at the right time, at the right dosage. You have nebulized hydrogen peroxide, you have melatonin, you know, all of this is for prevention. When it comes to treatment, you have Dr. Richard Fleming, who's published a paper on like really effective treatments. You have the math protocol, where
Hmm.
they use methylprednisone and you know, ascorbic acid like vitamin C and
See.
thiamine, and like one more thing to actually like treat the person. And they found
Yeah.
like really that when they've added this anti-parasitic drug, I forgot what it's called, but it's just like, I forgot the name of that, but they've added this new drug apparently that's uh, ivermectin.
Okay.
Ivermectin, that's the one. Yeah, so they've added that to the protocol and they're seeing better results with that. So as far as treatments are concerned, you have like 95% plus treatments that are available. If you don't want to get treatment, like, you know, get vaccinated with the natural good stuff, like get your, so many studies now showing insulin resistance, visceral fat, how that increases the risk of infections, obesity, how it weakens the immune system. I mean, there's so much like, you know, vitamin D, the
Yeah.
literature on
Yeah.
that is really, really solid. So there's so many things like you can do as prevention if you're like really scared of this virus or whatever. And I feel as our lifestyle, like the way we live, we don't need a virus to come and like show us how to live, right? Like it's just how we do it all the time. So when these things come up, it's not a problem for us, but the people who are living in that kind of pharmaceutical pill paradigm where they want to like take a medicine for every issue they have, that's where the problem is.
All right. I think if anyone has questions, we should. Uh, anyone here has anything that you want to
Okay,
ask?
I just want to say some main
Yeah.
things. 23 people died in Norway after receiving the COVID injection. This is like just from today. That's why I'm
Yes.
mentioning it. 66 deaths and 4,000 adverse events reported in America following COVID vaccines. 10 people died in Germany following COVID vaccines. 4 people died in Israel following COVID vaccine. And then there are like two, three people who've died in many, many places, like right after getting vaccinated in like 2, 3 days of getting the vaccine. So this is all data from today. Vaccine side effects have officially included anaphylactic reactions because I forgot to mention this, but a lot of the vaccines have a molecule called PEG,
Hmm.
polyethylene
Hmm.
glycol.
Hmm.
A lot of people already have antibodies too. So if you're going to inject that, you're going to give the person a like a anaphylactic reaction. And they've, at the audacity of this, they kind of got away with it by saying that okay, if the center has an EpiPen, then it's not a problem, and they can just take it and, you know, get an EpiPen later on. So they've seen you know, anaphylactic reaction. They've seen Bell's palsy, which is partial facial paralysis, which has come up in a lot of vaccine trial people. They've seen multi-system inflammatory syndrome. They've seen seizures, encephalomyelitis, which we spoke about in the, you know, the AstraZeneca trial. So they've seen all this, and on top of that, the FDA has actually listed a list of possible side
Hmm.
effects that could happen, which they're looking for in the surveillance data. So all of this has already come out. I spoke about the nanotechnology threat. That's a very, very real thing. The technology already exists. A lot of the applications are waiting for FDA approval. So this technology is already out there, and we have like technology we can't even see right now that can actually like, you know, keep a track of us inside and manipulate stuff that's going on inside. I spoke about how the trials are being done on healthy people, but then it's being given to everyone. So yeah, I mean, like they're the main risk, and also we have past examples to see that when these vaccines were rushed, like the H1N1, and before that the swine flu in the 1970s, we've seen that these rushed vaccines that came out in a year actually caused a lot of damage in their wake for people who took them. So I mean, combining all of this and combining the fact that the main important fact is, if you read Jacob Puliel, okay, he actually said this along with another person called Anand Phadke. He said every death in India that occurs post vaccination till now is officially considered a coincidence. It cannot be because of the vaccine.
Wow.
Yeah. So I mean, just think of it: you die from a COVID vaccine, and these same norms still apply. Like I don't know how they'd pull it off, because there's so many eyes focused on this issue. Like before, it was
Yes,
like, barely anyone cared, and they just
right.
obeyed the experts. But now that there's so much focus on this, I don't think they'll be able to get away with it that easily. But up till now, all deaths that have actually occurred post-vaccination have been considered coincidental and not because of the vaccine
Wow.
officially. They consider side effects, like with the same excuses that, oh, it's not
Right,
because of
right.
this, the person already had the problem and all that. But yeah, it's chilling to consider, like, if they go forward with that and they're able to actually push through that, then like so much of death and mayhem that actually because of the vaccines will totally get covered up, and they'll reclassify the thing as they've been doing till now in the past.
No, and like with this one, there are so many, like even abroad. Like I remember this nurse Tiffany, like she took the vaccine on screen, like she was being
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
recorded, and then she
He
uh,
disappeared.
she disappeared. Like she's just not there anymore. She's gone. And then we have other cases. I remember this lady had posted like her husband got the vaccine and he died 2 days later, right? So
Hmm.
many cases, like they're one off. They're like I mean, if you're looking for it, then you start seeing the whole picture. But a lot of people
Yeah.
miss this because they're not looking for them, right? So they get hidden. So Kasim's asking, the conclusion is don't take a vaccine. And then he's like, are you sure this conclusion is research, reached after thorough research and not just conspiracy theories? You want to answer that one?
I made the claim, so whatever I can cite. So if you want references and you're actually interested in posting the truth, I can provide them to you.
Yeah, we'll share the links on the tribe group only, so you can look at the links we've spoken of. So yeah, Kasim, I know so many people took the vaccine
And this is an argument that commonly comes up, right? So many people took it and you didn't have side effects. Okay, but that doesn't mean that the vaccine is a problem. It just means that it's just like a virus. Like it infected so many people, but it took down a few. So some people might be able to cope with it better. As I said, like a lot of the main risk with this vaccine is not what's necessarily going to happen at that point. Of course, we've seen those
exactly.
risks, but it's what it's going to do to your immune system to make it worse later on, which is something we've seen in all coronavirus vaccines. And I told you a study from 2019 that is specifically looking at the spike protein of the coronavirus made the infection worse later on. So we have a lot of real data to show that it's going to make it worse later on. It's not like what's happening right now. Fine, you get the vaccine, it'll be okay. It'll give you the illusion that, oh, it's fine. But later on, when you go out, when you naturally contract the infection, and let's say it gets worse, that time they'll blame it on a COVID mutation and not the vaccine. So that's how they
And
get
the
around.
other thing is like, see, if it triggers some level of mutation and 5 years later you develop something, no one's even going to
And
remember
the
to
main
trace.
thing,
Yeah,
no. I don't know how I missed this. They've they've developed the vaccine right now against the old spike protein. The spike protein is now mutated according to the WHO, and they're saying it
oh,
works. Like how the hell do you know that? I mean, you've
right.
not. It's just like they can just make it up and discuss some experts. They get some experts to say it, and then the media starts parroting it, and it just becomes truth. Like that's the way things have been going till now, And then everyone who kind of all the experts who critique what they're saying are censored. Just the heights of America's frontline doctors came and actually gave a press conference, and they were censored, like for saying hydroxychloroquine works, which is
Yeah.
something that's been on the shelf for a very long time, and it doesn't have such a high side effect profile such as remdesivir does. Hydroxychloroquine is way better than remdesivir in terms of side effects. But they were censored. So anyone who's coming and giving an alternative opinion to this entire paradigm of, oh, only masks and vaccines work and only sheltering and social distancing and locking yourselves up are the only things we can do against this, it's just nonsense. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
scientific garbage.
Yeah. So Yugesh is asking, did not understand. In case we have antibodies, then should we opt for vaccine or not? And then he's also asking if Covaxin has spike protein or does AstraZeneca have spike protein?
Yeah. So okay. So sorry, can you repeat the first question?
The first
Actually, I
one
understood
is,
that.
he says, I did not understand. In case we have antibodies, then
Okay,
should we
yeah. So
opt for
I
the
was gonna
vaccine or not?
say, that we have a recent paper that just got published, which said that natural immunity to coronavirus can actually give you really long term immunity, and we also have studies that have shown that previous immunity to cold viruses and other coronaviruses have been shown to give cross-reactive T cell immunity against this specific variant. So you obviously have like a natural immunity does carry forward, and as I said in the beginning of this talk, you contracting a natural infection is the gold standard of
Hmm.
your immune
Right.
system dealing with a virus. Vaccine is just like a weakened version trying to mimic that, which is why they have to give you these boosters and all these shots every year for measles and all, whereas the natural measles infection just makes you immune for your entire life, right? So
Right.
that's the difference between like the Mercedes Maruti. And the
Okay.
second one was, does
Does
the
Covaxin
Covaxin
have, or
contain
does
the
the,
spike protein?
yeah, or
No,
does Astra?
Covaxin is attenuated, weakened version of the virus, an inactivated, vaccine. So it has the whole virus, which is why these people are making absolutely speculative claims that since it's the whole virus, okay, it's likely to protect against mutation because you're vaccinating against the whole thing. And AstraZeneca is the one where they've used the spike protein, but it's not just the spike protein. They've latched the spike protein onto an adenovirus from which they've got from these chimpanzees. And the theory is that that adenovirus is not supposed to, like, it's not infectious to you, so they just use it to latch onto that, and then it goes and actually like pushes that spike protein into your cell. That's how it works. So the AstraZeneca one has a spike protein. The Covaxin one obviously has the spike protein, but not just the spike protein. And even the AstraZeneca one doesn't just have the spike protein. Only Pfizer and Moderna just have the mRNA of the spike protein.
What is the name of the test to check for antibodies?
It's a normal antibody test.
Yeah,
Like you get
just
an
the
antibody
COVID
against
antibody test.
SARS-CoV-2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about elderly in the house? Do you suggest even elderly should not take the vaccination?
Yeah, I mean, like I just gave the entire reason for
Yeah.
why they shouldn't, right? Like elderly are all the more at a risk,
At
and they've
risk,
not been
yes.
tested in these trials. They've not been tested in these trials. They found it really hard to get elderly people recruited in these trials, to be honest. So they've not really tested the vaccine out thoroughly on elderly people.
In fact,
And
I
you might
remember one, I think it was yesterday or day before, in a Norway nursing home which had elderly people, they gave the COVID vaccine and then like so many residents died or something like that, right?
That's what I said, no?
The
23 people
yeah, 23
died
people,
in Norway
yeah.
after getting COVID injection.
Yeah.
They were the elderly who died. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
we
they
have
were
like
all
data. Yeah.
they were all socially distanced, isolated in their nursing home. They had not met their family members and all of that. And then they were given the COVID vaccine, and then 23 people died.
Yeah, so your elderly, you want to protect them, they need vitamin D, they need good nutrition, they need to be insulin sensitive. You can do all these things. You're working with us for a reason, so we obviously can help you do that, and we can show you the science of how that actually reduces, that makes it more resilient to them, even despite. So I'll give you an example. Like age is supposed to increase the risk of COVID by 10 times, right? That's a fact. But vitamin D can play a role up to 15 times to actually cut your outcome. So like fine, age is not in your control, but just by like making sure your vitamin D levels are in the optimum range, you can cut your risk down by 15 times compared to like 10 times was the hand that it dealt with. And I mean, aging also is a problem, not because of the age, it's because of the age impact that's had on the immune system and your immunosenescence and all. So
Exactly.
the more you work on your metabolic flexibility and like actually practice good lifestyle, saunas are really very therapeutic for elderly people, and there's a lot they can do. Like the
Yeah,
solution is not just
lots.
a vaccine. And even if your elderly does succumb, there are treatments that are available which scientists have published and like which are being given in hospitals. It's just that you need like to be informed and you need to demand these things, and you need to figure out like
Exactly.
where you're going to get them. So yeah, it's not the end of the world.
I think Hassan's so he's like the Pfizer vaccination has been given here for all elderly people 60 to 70 and above, and with chronic conditions like diabetes and BP. So I think Hassan, your point is like they've been given those vaccinations, and you're saying that they've not died or there are no side effects, and that's why this conclusion is a faulty one. Is that what you're trying to?
That's like saying that like bunch of people smoke cigarettes, but only few of them
Yeah.
died from cancer. Like, would you say like cigarettes don't cause cancer because of that?
Yeah.
I mean, of course, like that's why I said it's a two-way street, and there are people who are more equipped to handle vaccine damage. And again, like I think I'm saying this for the second time, that the main risk is not dying at the spot. Although some people are, of course, having that who are very very frail and weak, but the main risk is it messing up your
Over
immune system to
time.
develop an infection twice as bad later on.
Yeah. What to give to children as school start? Don't give them chips, don't give them Coke, don't give them Maggie, give them good food, vitamin D, sunlight, natural air, and they wouldn't ever need a vaccine, Yogesh.
Yeah, and
But there's no
eat a
need to.
nutrient dense
Yeah.
diet. Veganism is really
Yeah.
wrecking people's health.
Yeah, but like if you take care of a child's terrain, right, which is the body, they don't really need vaccines. So, and childhood colds and flus are part of the body's adaptive immune. It's part of the system learning how to adapt to all the pathogens that are there in the environment. So, like I don't think anyone should really be afraid of coronavirus and kids, because if you look at kids, they literally have no mortality at all from COVID. Like, because, and I've been researching this because my daughter is 10, and like there's been this thing about her coming to India, traveling and all of that. They are at zero risk. Kids literally are at zero risk. The population that is at risk, if at all we have to look at coronavirus, it's the elderly and the ones who have um, underlying metabolic issues. But kids are really not at risk. And should we give medicines if they contract? Should we give medicine to kids if they contract COVID? Kids get over it. It's like just a flu. So if you were going to give a medicine, maybe to kind of help with, like, see, it's the same thing, guys. And we've spoken
How would you
of,
know? Firstly,
yeah,
let's
yeah,
focus on how would you know if they had COVID. Like you'd go and
right,
get a PCR done, and then that would say it's COVID, and then you think it's COVID. But that's been the whole scam in this entire thing. That the inventor of the PCR test itself said that it's a research-based test that's supposed to be used. It was a DNA manufacturing technique. Like
yeah,
the test was made to actually like take small, like tiny segments of DNA and like expand them, so the researchers could actually analyze the segments and the sequences. So this test was never meant to diagnose an active like infection. Okay, so just getting a PCR, and there are a lot of problems in the PCR which I don't want to like go into. Of course, like I've gone into
yeah,
it in other videos of mine, but it's just like the entire idea that PCR is something that's totally specific. It's not true. It can give you false positives because it like the sequence that it's trying to match, that trying to find, also overlaps with past coronaviruses that you've always had. There's a lot of risk of false positives, and just the test. I mean, there's so many like layers in the test. Like the PCR seems simple to scientists who are using them because like just press a button and it starts. But behind the scenes, there's actually like a couple of steps from the extraction to like how the efficiency of the enzymes involved, and there's so much stuff, technical stuff that actually changes the result from lab to lab. And the cycle numbers are the most important because even like Fauci came out and said recently that a cycle number above 35 is essentially worthless. And you have so many labs around the world that are running CT values as high as like 40 and 45.
40,
It's totally
yeah,
criminal,
yeah,
and then
yeah,
they're taking our liberties away and actually creating so much panic and false hysteria and hiking the numbers up and justifying lockdown on the basis of this test. So the test is the problem in a main way. I'm not saying that COVID doesn't exist. There are better ways to kind of diagnose and figure out if you have it or not. But the problem is that if you feel a child is getting a viral flu, treat it like you would treat any other infection. Like the best thing you can do with a viral flu is always have zinc on hand.
yep,
Zinc acetate and gluconate are the only ones that have been shown to have benefit in cutting the symptoms of a cold. So the best thing to do when you get a cold is, of course, you want to keep your vitamin D levels up throughout the year. You want to keep them in that 40 to 60 sweet spot. Okay, I mean, I've seen people giving higher recommendations, but that comes with a slight risk of kidney stones and calcification,
yep,
and also
yep,
I don't
yep.
feel that confident unless it's an autoimmune patient. I don't feel confident going there for generally, but 40 to 55, 60 is like a sweet spot that you want to maintain throughout the year. Of course, like through taking sunlight, and then in the winters taking supplementation. So if you are there, it's very highly unlikely you'll actually succumb.
Mm,
I've been actively supplementing with vitamin D throughout, and I mean, even though my servant got a cold, and like I'm still fine. So
yeah,
like it does show that I know like even Dr. Mercola, who's like really up on his vitamin D level, he's not like fallen sick of a viral infection for a very long time. So it is possible that if you keep your vitamin D levels maintained, you'll not succumb in the first place. But let's say you do, and your micronutrient status is not good, so you want zinc acetate lozenges on hand. There's a brand called Life Extension that actually makes enhanced zinc lozenges. Like you want to look for that. And whenever you feel like you're going down with the cold, it only works on the first or second day, max third day. Okay, like the efficiency reduces with each day. So if you spot a cold on the first day in your child and you start them with that, it's like a slow dissolving zinc that dissolves in your mouth, and you're supposed to take it every 2 hours for like 2 or 3 days until it's totally gone, and it will kill your cold in 2 3 days
even
without
echinacea, yeah,
you having to go through it for a very long time. So that's very effective. I've seen it work for myself. I used it when I had COVID in February, and I know I had COVID because it wasn't like a normal cold. I didn't have a
yeah,
runny nose and all. Just like really messed up dry cough and like discomfort in the lungs and like very very slight shortness of breath and all. So I knew I had something different back then. So the zinc worked for me. I didn't even know. I mean, there's no research out on this or anything. It's
Yeah.
totally new territory. But I just knew that I take this for cold. I've taken it for cold in the past, and I took it and it worked, and it was gone in like a couple of days. So
And the other thing that works really well for kids, right, is elderberry syrup and echinacea. I've seen it work phenomenally every time. Even my daughter got, like, you start elderberry the minute you feel the first scratch and the sniffle in your throat. So elderberry, echinacea, these two herbs work brilliantly and I'll send these links on the drive, Yogesh. Like even the zinc acetate that he spoke of, the life extension one, that one, and the elderberry syrup and the echinacea for kids. I'll send all of it on the tribe. Any other questions here? Anyone else? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. If RT-PCR isn't working, how to diagnose COVID-19?
that's a good question. So if you see, its patented technology is not available to the public yet. So this is something that's been in the research use right now. But I would say like in terms of an active infection, I would totally go on symptoms. Like since I don't trust, the thing is like, look, you can do a lot of things to make the PCR better. So let's say a lot of the guidelines that experts have recommended for the PCR were standardized and they were using these low cycle thresholds, and then they were using the right primers that were actually specific to this, virus, although the virus keeps mutating. So that's another problem. But I mean, we can only do as much as we can with the scientific tools we have. Never be perfect. But if a lot of that stuff was done, I would trust the PCR a lot more. Like I would definitely trust a PCR that has a cycle cutoff of say 30 or something than compared to a PCR that's using 40. But as of now, I would say just totally base it on symptoms. Like that's it. And if you do happen to get a PCR and the PCR says that like it kind of detected the infection at say 25 or 27, then I would put some stock in it. Okay. But then even there are problems, but then at least I would get some more confidence compared to if like my test tested positive at 40 cycle threshold, then I'd be like it's absolutely worthless. But if it is showing it early combined with symptomatic profile, like people are looking at blood markers also, so they're looking at d-dimer levels to see if there's blood clotting involved, and like this is something like that. Like you can use this in triangulation. Like the symptoms are very unique, so if you have a cold, it's very very likely that it's not COVID. Okay, this usually comes with it's mainly focused on the lungs, so you'll have like a coughing and a shortness of breath kind of issue because the problem is happening in your blood. It's not that the lungs are a problem, but the blood is not being able to carry the oxygen. That's what the problem that's been observed is seen. So yeah, I mean, like you have to triangulate. There's the test that I'm talking about. Like if you see Richard Fleming's paper, where he did develop actual treatments for this infection and used it in a clinical setting, and actually had a very very like 95% plus success rate with the treatments with only one dropout who died. Uh, he used a specific test that he's come up with. That's not that's not available for general public use yet. So when that is, of course, like it'll be better for people. And look, the whole problem is right now testing is being used by the state in a positive fashion to take people's like freedoms and liberties away and actually like force things on them, right? But then actual testing in a normal setting is something that we use to figure out what's going on, and we know that like they're not perfect and they do come with false positive and false negative rates, right? So tests are not going to be like 100% perfect ever. Like I was just seeing the study recently that figured out like GI map, that test that I think Genova offers in
Right.
America, GI map.
Right.
Like they have a like pretty high false positive rate with some of the parasites they're scanning for in the
Wow.
intestine. So, and that's a very expensive test, right? So tests aren't perfect. Like even a lot of, if you see for since I researched this so deeply, like if you see the technology they're using to actually figure out genetic mutations, they're using the PCR for that.
I
So,
know.
but that's very specific because you're trying to look for the mutation exists and you're trying to find that. And if you have the right primer, you can very easily find that. And it's not about a quantity. It's not a virus or something that you need to have
Yeah, like the
load.
MTHFR thing also, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's what I said. Like it kind of better has better applications in some places. Definitely for viruses, I would say antibody tests are a better way to go to see if you've had if you've contracted it in the past or not. Yeah.
Why do we suffer weakness after 20 days, even if they were even if they were asymptomatic during the first? Because what's happening in the body? So Yogesh, that has a lot to do with what's happening metabolically in the body, right? Which is what we focus on at Thrive. That we fix insulin resistance, we take care of deficiencies, we make sure your toxin levels are low. So a lot of people, given the lifestyles they're living, they don't even know these things are happening in their bodies. Like when we do your analysis for the first time, when you look at your blood work, and then we share your report with you, most people are often surprised with all the reds they see, right? So, but then you've done it, now we're doing work to change that. A lot of people who've gotten infected, who might recover, don't even know the underlying health problems that they have. And any infection does deplete you, right? Any infection. So even with the COVID one, it depletes your
I
systems.
think
Yeah.
I'll sorry to cut you, but I think this
Yeah.
question is coming from a point where I think the person is thinking that we don't think COVID is a problem.
Yeah.
I don't think we've said that. I
Yeah.
think COVID is a different thing, and
Yeah.
it is a problem, and it's
Yeah.
not just like the flu, like most people say. In terms of the death rate, it's just like the flu, but in terms of the symptomatic profile and how it manifests, it's definitely not.
No, there is this
But
long haul COVID thing happening, right?
yeah,
Which is what we're seeing worldwide, that people actually suffer more later on.
yeah, but
And the,
is that because of the, like, there's also a lot of confounding factors. Like, is it because of
exactly,
the COVID? Is it because of the treatments you had when you went to hospital,
exactly,
which we know that
exactly.
they have known side effects? So, like, yeah.
Yeah. All right. I think we should wrap it up, Johan. If you have questions, do ask them on the tribe, on the WhatsApp group, and Johan's there. And then so I'll share the links of the supplements we spoke of. Johan, can you share the research papers and the documents you
Yeah,
referred to so people can
I'll do
go
that.
look
I'll
at?
do that.
And then if there are any questions, we'll answer those there.
Sure.
And I'll save this recording and I'll upload it. So if you missed the beginning, any of you want to go back, watch it again, you can do that. All right.
Cool. Thanks everyone.